She begged him with a newborn baby in her arms, but he kicked them out into the night without mercy. Years later, the same woman would build an empire from nothing, while the man who threw her away would beg to survive. But when they finally met again, what the daughter did shocked everyone. Sit back and let's dive into this unbelievable story. Nancy clutched her 1-month-old daughter Ivy tighter as John's voice cut through the night air like a sharp knife. "Pack your things and get out of my house," he shouted, pointing his finger toward the door. His face was twisted with disgust as he looked at Nancy holding their crying baby. "I'm done with this nonsense. You and that child are just holding me back from my real future." Nancy's hands shook as she tried to quiet Ivy, who was wailing from hunger. The baby's cries filled the small living room of their modest apartment in Port Harcourt. Nancy's eyes were red and swollen from crying all day, since John had told her about his plans. "John, please," she begged, falling to her knees on the cold concrete floor. "You know I have nowhere to go. Ivy is just a baby. She's barely a month old. We are your family." But John's eyes were cold and empty, like stones in a river. He was dressed in his best clothes, preparing to go out to meet his pregnant mistress, Vanessa. Over the past few months, as his construction business grew and the money started flowing in, John had changed completely. The man who once loved Nancy for her simple heart and hard-working spirit now saw her as beneath him. "Family?" John laughed bitterly. "Don't make me laugh, Nancy. You think I will waste my life with a local bread seller like you? I'm building my future with Vanessa now. She's educated, she's beautiful, and she's already carrying my son. My real son who will inherit everything I own." Nancy looked down at little Ivy, who was squirming and crying in her wrapper. The baby's tiny face was red from crying, and her small hands were reaching out as if searching for comfort. Nancy's heart broke as she looked at her innocent daughter. "But John, she's your daughter too," Nancy whispered, her voice barely audible above the baby's cries. "I don't want her," John said sharply, his voice filled with hatred. "I told you already. Vanessa is giving me a son, a boy who will carry my name and inherit my properties. That girl child is useless to me. Now pack your things and go. Vanessa will be here soon, and I don't want her to see you." Nancy's world crumbled around her. She had met John 3 years ago when she was selling bread on the streets. Back then, he was just a regular worker at a construction site, earning small money. They had fallen in love when they both had nothing. They supported each other through difficult times. John would buy bread from her every morning, and slowly their friendship grew into love. When Nancy became pregnant, John was happy. He promised to take care of her and their child. But as his business began to grow, and he became a site supervisor earning good money, he began to change. He started complaining about Nancy's background, saying she was too local for his new status. Then he met Vanessa, a young woman who worked in an office in the city. She was everything Nancy was not: educated, well-dressed, and from a good family. When Vanessa became pregnant, John made his choice. That night, Nancy walked the dark streets of Port Harcourt with nothing but her crying daughter and a small nylon bag containing their few clothes. The city was dangerous at night, with poor lighting and empty streets. People passed by without even looking at the young mother carrying her baby. Nancy's legs ached from walking, and her back was still sore from giving birth just a month ago. She had no parents to run to, no siblings to help her. She was an orphan who had come to the city years ago to escape the poverty of her village. All she had was her baby daughter and the clothes on her back. As she walked through the empty streets, Nancy's mind raced with fear and desperation. Where would they sleep? How would she feed Ivy? How would she survive with a newborn baby and no money? After walking for hours, Nancy stumbled upon an uncompleted building by the roadside. The structure had no roof, just concrete walls and a rough cement floor. The air smelled like wet concrete and dust. Nancy sat on the hard floor, unwrapped Ivy from her back, and began to feed her. As she nursed her daughter, tears fell onto her lap. The night was cold and she could hear strange noises from the streets, but she held Ivy close and whispered, "No matter what happens, my child, I will fight for you. We will not die here. I promise you that." The next morning, Nancy tied Ivy securely to her back with a wrapper and stepped out to look for work. She walked from street to street, shop to shop, asking for any kind of job. Her stomach was empty, but she ignored the hunger. All that mattered was finding a way to feed her baby. At the first shop, the owner took one look at her and hissed, "With that crying baby? Abeg waka. I no want wahala for my business." At the second shop, the man told her to try the next street. At the third shop, the woman said she had no work. Rejection followed rejection as Nancy walked under the hot sun, with Ivy crying from hunger and discomfort. By afternoon, Nancy was exhausted and discouraged. Her wrapper was soaked with sweat, and Ivy was crying nonstop. Just when she was about to give up, she saw a small food stall owned by a plump woman in her 50s. The woman, who introduced herself as Mama Glory, looked at Nancy with suspicious eyes. "You dey find work?" "Yes, Ma. Please, I can wash plates, clean, do anything. I just need work to feed my baby." Mama Glory studied Nancy for a long moment, then pointed to a pile of dirty plates. "Wash these plates. Let me see how you work." Nancy immediately got to work. She washed plates from morning till evening, scrubbing each one until it shone. Ivy cried on her back, disturbing some customers who frowned and complained about the noise. Nancy tried to quiet her daughter while continuing to work, but it was difficult. At closing time, Mama Glory handed Nancy 700 naira and some leftover jollof rice wrapped in a nylon bag. "Your baby cried too much," she said, shaking her head. "You can't come tomorrow. My customers no like that kind disturbance." Nancy nodded quietly, thanked Mama Glory, and walked back to the uncompleted building with her small earnings and leftover food. That night, as she fed Ivy under the open sky, Nancy made a decision. She would not let their situation defeat her. She would find a way to survive and build a better life for her daughter. For the next week, Nancy did whatever odd jobs she could find. She cleaned shops, washed clothes for busy mothers, fetched water for tenants in crowded compounds. Every kobo she earned, she saved carefully. She always fed Ivy first before eating anything herself. One afternoon, as she counted her money, Nancy realized she had enough to start something small. She had an idea that came from her years of selling bread on the streets. Nancy bought beans, palm oil, pepper, and flour from the market. She borrowed an old frying pan from a kind neighbor and began making akara and chin-chin by the roadside. She set up her small business on a busy street corner where office workers passed by in the mornings and evenings. At first, only a few customers stopped to buy, but Nancy's akara was different. It was soft inside and crispy outside, perfectly seasoned with pepper and onions. Her chin-chin melted in the mouth, sweet and crunchy. Word began to spread. Office workers started coming regularly. Some even began to place orders for their offices. Nancy's reputation grew slowly but steadily. By Ivy's first birthday, Nancy had saved enough money to rent a tiny room in a compound. It had no proper door, just a curtain, and the floor was bare cement. But it was home. She laid Ivy on a mat and whispered, "We are no longer homeless, my child. This is just the beginning." As Ivy grew, her personality began to show. By age 3, she was observant and always asking questions about everything around her. "Mummy, why we no have a big house like Auntie next door?" Ivy would ask. Nancy would smile and pat her daughter's head. "Because we are still climbing the mountain, my dear. But we will get there. Just be patient." When Ivy turned 5, Nancy enrolled her in the nearest public school. She could only afford one uniform and a few basic books, but Ivy didn't complain. In school, she was focused, respectful, and hungry for knowledge. Her teachers noticed her intelligence and eagerness to learn. When her classmates asked about her father, Ivy would simply say, "I don't have one. I only have Mummy and she's enough for me." By age 8, Ivy started helping her mother after school. She would sit beside the akara stand, pack snacks into nylons, and collect money from customers. People began to notice the neat little girl and her hard-working mother. Nancy's business continued to grow. Her akara and chin-chin became famous in that part of the city. People would travel from different neighborhoods just to buy her snacks. One day, a regular customer named Auntie Mabel approached Nancy with an exciting request. "Nancy, I want to order your snacks for my niece's birthday party next weekend. I need 20 packs of chin-chin and 50 pieces of akara." Nancy was thrilled. This was her biggest order yet. She put her heart and soul into preparing for the party, frying until midnight to make sure everything was perfect. The birthday party was a huge success. Guests loved the snacks and kept asking for Nancy's contact information. Auntie Mabel told everyone, Her name is Nancy. Her snacks are the best in the city. After that party, more orders began to come in. Nancy's phone started ringing with requests for weddings, office parties, and family gatherings. She realized she needed help. Nancy saved her money and rented a small store. She hired 2 assistants and left the roadside for good. She registered her business as Ivy's Snacks and painted a beautiful sign for her store. Meanwhile, Ivy was excelling in school. Her teachers were amazed by her intelligence and dedication. One day, her principal called Nancy for a meeting. "Mrs. Nancy, your daughter is exceptional. I want to recommend her for a scholarship program run by an NGO. They provide full education support for brilliant children from poor families." Nancy's eyes filled with tears of joy. Ivy took the entrance test and passed with flying colors. She was awarded a scholarship that would cover her secondary school and university education. Nancy wept with happiness. She bought Ivy a new school bag and shoes and told her, "Your future is bright, my daughter. Go and shine like the star you are." As the years passed, Nancy's business continued to flourish. She opened 3 more branches across Port Harcourt. She hired several staff members and bought a small second-hand car. She moved with Ivy to a decent apartment with proper tiles, running water, and electricity. Their life had completely transformed from the days of sleeping in an uncompleted building. While Nancy and Ivy were building their success, John was living comfortably with his mistress Vanessa. She had given birth to a boy, just as he had wanted. They lived in a big flat, and John spoiled Vanessa with gold jewelry and expensive clothes. He was convinced he had made the right choice. But life has a way of surprising people. One ordinary Tuesday morning, tragedy struck at John's construction site. A steel beam collapsed while being lifted by a crane. John was caught beneath it, and although he survived, he became paralyzed from the waist down. At first, Vanessa stayed by his side. But as the medical bills mounted and John's income stopped, their savings began to disappear. The big flat was sold, the car was sold, the gold jewelry was sold. As their money ran out, Vanessa's love ran out too. She became cold and distant. She complained constantly about their situation and blamed John for the accident. One morning, John woke up to find Vanessa packing her bags. She had their son dressed and ready to go. "Where are you going?" John asked from his wheelchair. "I'm leaving," Vanessa said without looking at him. "I can't live like this anymore. I'm still young and beautiful. I can find someone better." "But what about our son?" John pleaded. Vanessa turned to him with a cruel smile. "That child is not your son. I lied to you. I only said he was yours to secure my place. I was already pregnant when I met you. Goodbye, John." John felt like his world had ended. He cried like a baby as Vanessa walked out with the child he had believed was his son. His house was sold to pay debts. His friends disappeared. Now living in a small face me I face you apartment, he lay on a thin mattress, helpless and alone. Day after day, John lay there thinking about his life. He began to remember Nancy and baby Ivy. He remembered how Nancy had begged him not to throw them out. He remembered the look of disgust on his face when he looked at his own daughter. Regret consumed him like a fire. He realized that in chasing what he thought was a better life, he had lost everything that truly mattered. While John was rotting away in poverty and loneliness, Ivy was reaching new heights. She graduated from the university with first-class honors in medicine. Nancy sat proudly in the front row of the graduation hall, tears of joy flowing freely down her cheeks. "My daughter is now a doctor," Nancy whispered, hugging Ivy tightly after the ceremony. Ivy got a job at one of the best hospitals in the city. She became known not just for her medical skills, but also for her kindness and compassion toward patients. She never forgot where she came from or the struggles she and her mother had faced. But Ivy didn't stop there. She opened a free clinic in her mother's name, Nancy Medical Center. It was specifically for poor people who couldn't afford medical treatment. Every month, despite her busy schedule at the main hospital, Ivy visited the clinic personally. She diagnosed patients, donated medical supplies, and ensured that no one was turned away because of money. One weekend, Ivy and Nancy arrived at the clinic carrying bags of medicine and supplies. The waiting room was full of people. Mothers with sick children, elderly people with various ailments, and young people who had nowhere else to go. They moved from bed to bed, checking on patients and offering comfort. "Thank you, Dr. Ivy," said one old man with tears in his eyes. "May God bless you and your mother." You are angels." When they reached the last bed in the ward, the nurse pulled Nancy aside. "Madam, this man was brought here 2 months ago," she whispered. "No identification, no family. He can't walk, and he barely talks. We don't even know his name." Nancy walked closer to the bed. The man lying there was thin and looked much older than his years. His hair was gray, and his face was sunken. But something about him seemed familiar. Nancy's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to race. "John," she whispered. The thin man on the bed stirred slowly and opened his eyes. When he saw Nancy, his eyes widened with shock and recognition. "Nancy," he said weakly, his voice barely a whisper. Ivy, who had been checking another patient, walked over to see what was happening. She looked confused as she saw her mother standing frozen beside the bed. "Mummy, who is this man?" Ivy asked. Nancy hesitated for a long moment, then took a deep breath. That is your father." Ivy felt like she had been struck by lightning. She stared at the weak, broken man on the bed. This was the man who had thrown them out into the streets when she was just a baby? This was the man who had called her useless and said he didn't want her? "This is the man who threw us out?" Ivy asked quietly. Nancy nodded slowly, tears beginning to form in her eyes. John looked at Ivy with wonder and pain. Here was his daughter, grown up, educated, successful, and beautiful. Here was the child he had rejected, now a doctor helping people in need. "I'm sorry," John began to cry. "I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't know. I was so foolish. Please forgive me. Ivy, my daughter, please forgive your father." Ivy's face went blank. She felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and pain. Without saying a word, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving John to cry on his bed. That night, Ivy sat quietly on the balcony of their apartment, staring out at the city lights. Nancy joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You should forgive him," Nancy said gently, sitting beside her daughter. "Mummy, after everything he did to you, after he threw us out with nothing, after he called me useless." "Yes, my dear, but holding anger in your heart only poisons you. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened. It doesn't mean you trust him again or let him back into your life. It means you choose peace over bitterness." Ivy was quiet for a long time, thinking about her mother's words. She thought about all the nights they had slept hungry, all the times they had struggled, all the pain they had endured because of John's choices. The next day, Ivy returned to the clinic. She walked slowly to her father's bed and stood beside it. John looked up at her with eyes full of guilt and hope. "I forgive you," Ivy said softly, her voice steady and calm. John broke down completely. "Thank you, my daughter. Thank you so much. But I want you to understand something," Ivy continued. "I don't need a father now. I had my mother, and she was enough. She was father and mother to me. However, I won't leave you here to suffer." Ivy arranged for John to be transferred to a government care facility for aged and disabled people. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and safe. He would be fed, clothed, and receive proper medical care. Before the transfer, John held Ivy's hand weakly. "I know I don't deserve your kindness. I know I lost the right to call you my daughter, but I want you to know that seeing who you've become, it's the only good thing that has come from my life." John spent his remaining years at the care facility. He never asked for anything more from Ivy. Occasionally, he would send small notes through the facility staff, always expressing gratitude and never requesting visits or money. Years passed. Ivy got married to a kind doctor who loved and respected her. Nancy walked her daughter down the aisle at the wedding, beaming with pride. At the reception, people praised the successful doctor and her incredible mother. Nancy sat back and smiled as she watched Ivy dance with her husband. Later, when Ivy had her own daughter, Nancy held her granddaughter and whispered, "Look how far we've come, little one, from sleeping on concrete floors to this beautiful life." They had built their success without hate, without bitterness, and without John. Love, determination, and hard work had been their foundation. As Nancy watched her daughter's happy family, she knew that their greatest victory was not the money or the success. It was the fact that they had risen above their circumstances without losing their humanity. They had chosen forgiveness over revenge, hard work over self-pity, and love over hate. And that, Nancy believed, was the real triumph of their story.